What if I told you that the difference between those who struggle through life and those who seem to effortlessly win at everything isn't talent, luck, or even hard work? What if the real secret is something far more subtle, yet infinitely more powerful? The truth is, while most people react to life, a small elite group of individuals think strategically. They don't just respond to challenges, they anticipate them. They don't just solve problems, they prevent them. They don't just adapt to change, they create it. Strategic thinking is the ultimate meta skill. It's the ability to see patterns where others see chaos, to find opportunity where others see obstacles, and to position yourself for victory before the game even begins. This isn't just about business or competition. This is about mastering the art of living itself. Whether you're navigating career challenges, building relationships, making financial decisions, or pursuing personal goals, strategic thinking gives you an unfair advantage. But here's what most people don't understand about strategic thinking. It's not some mystical gift that only generals and CEOs possess. It's a learnable system of mental models, frameworks, and principles that anyone can master. The problem is, nobody teaches you this in school. You're expected to figure it out on your own, and most people never do. Today, that changes. By the end of this audiobook, you'll think differently. You'll see the world through the lens of strategy, spotting opportunities and threats that others miss entirely. You'll develop the ability to think several moves ahead, to position yourself advantageously, and to turn any challenge into a stepping stone toward your goals. Most importantly, you'll learn to play the game of life like a grandmaster plays chess, with intention, foresight, and precision. Chapter 1. The Strategic Mindset Revolution. Most people live their lives in reactive mode. They wake up, respond to whatever demands immediate attention, put out fires, and go to bed, exhausted, wondering why they never seem to get ahead. They're constantly playing defense, always one step behind, perpetually caught off guard by circumstances they should have seen coming. This is the default mode of human existence, and it's exactly why most people never achieve their true potential. Strategic thinkers operate from a fundamentally different paradigm. They understand that life is not a series of random events happening to them, but a complex system of cause and effect that can be influenced, directed, and leveraged. They see patterns where others see chaos. They identify leverage points where small actions can create massive results. They think in systems, not just events. The strategic mindset begins with a crucial realization that your current position in life is not permanent. Every situation you find yourself in, whether good or bad, is temporary and changeable. The question isn't whether your circumstances will change, but whether you'll be the one directing that change or simply reacting to it. Strategic thinkers choose to be the authors of their own story, rather than passive characters in someone else's narrative. One of the most powerful aspects of strategic thinking is the ability to zoom out and see the bigger picture while simultaneously drilling down into crucial details. Most people get trapped in one of two extremes. They either get so caught up in day-to-day minutiae that they lose sight of their long-term direction, or they think so abstractly about the future that they fail to take concrete action in the present. Strategic thinkers master the art of moving fluidly between these different levels of thinking. The strategic mindset also involves understanding that everything is connected. Your career decisions affect your relationships. Your health choices impact your productivity. Your financial habits influence your opportunities. Strategic thinkers don't compartmentalize their lives into separate, unrelated areas. They understand that life is an integrated system where changes in one area create ripple effects throughout everything else. Perhaps most importantly, strategic thinking requires you to develop what military strategists call situational awareness. This is the ability to accurately perceive and understand your environment, the forces at play, and how they're likely to evolve. Most people operate with tunnel vision, focusing only on what's directly in front of them. Strategic thinkers constantly scan their environment for signals, trends, and emerging patterns that others miss. This level of awareness extends to understanding your own strengths, weaknesses, motivations, and blind spots. You cannot develop an effective strategy without brutal honesty about your current capabilities and limitations. This isn't about self-criticism, it's about accurate self-assessment that allows you to position yourself advantageously and make decisions that align with your actual abilities rather than your wishful thinking. The strategic mindset also embraces paradox and complexity rather than seeking simple answers to complex problems. While most people want straightforward solutions and clear-cut choices, strategic thinkers understand that the most powerful approaches often involve holding multiple perspectives simultaneously, finding creative ways to turn apparent contradictions into complementary forces. Strategic thinkers also develop a sophisticated relationship with time. They understand that different actions have different time horizons for impact. Some moves pay off immediately, others take years to mature. They learn to balance short-term necessities with long-term positioning, never sacrificing their future for momentary gains, but also never becoming so focused on the future that they neglect present realities. Finally, the strategic mindset requires emotional regulation and the ability to think clearly under pressure. When most people face stress, uncertainty, or crisis, their thinking becomes reactive and narrow. Strategic thinkers train themselves to remain calm and clear-headed, precisely when everyone else is losing their composure. This gives them a massive advantage because they can see opportunities and solutions that stressed minds miss. Chapter 2. The Architecture of Strategic Intelligence. Strategic intelligence isn't about being smart in the traditional sense. Some of the most academically brilliant people struggle with strategic thinking because they've been trained to find the one right answer to well-defined problems. Real life doesn't work that way. Strategic intelligence is about developing the cognitive tools to navigate ambiguity, uncertainty, and complexity while making decisions with incomplete information. The foundation of strategic intelligence is pattern recognition. Everything in life follows patterns, from market cycles to human behavior to technological adoption curves. Most people notice patterns only after they've fully played out, by which time the opportunity has passed. Strategic thinkers train themselves to spot emerging patterns while they're still forming, giving them the ability to position themselves advantageously before others even realize what's happening. Pattern recognition requires you to consume information differently than most people. Instead of just reading for content, you read for underlying structures. Instead of just observing events, you look for the forces that create those events. Instead of just noting what happened, you ask why it happened when it did, and what conditions made it possible. The second pillar of strategic intelligence is systems thinking. This is the ability to see how different parts of a system interact with each other, how changes in one area create cascading effects elsewhere, and how the whole system behaves in ways that can't be predicted by looking at individual components. Most people think linearly, assuming that causes and effects are directly connected and proportional. Strategic thinkers understand that small changes can have massive effects, that effects can precede causes, and that the most powerful interventions often happen at points that seem unrelated to the desired outcome. Systems thinking also involves understanding feedback loops, both positive and negative. Positive feedback loops amplify changes, creating exponential growth or decline. Negative feedback loops create stability and resistance to change. Strategic thinkers learn to identify these loops and leverage them rather than fighting against them. They understand that trying to force change against strong negative feedback loops is usually futile, while finding ways to trigger positive feedback loops can create dramatic results with minimal effort. The third component of strategic intelligence is scenario planning. This involves developing the ability to think through multiple possible futures and prepare for various contingencies. Most people have a single mental model of how things will unfold, which leaves them unprepared when reality doesn't match their expectations. Strategic thinkers develop multiple scenarios, from best case to worst case, and create flexible plans that can adapt to different outcomes. Scenario planning isn't about predicting the future, which is impossible. It's about expanding your mental models so you can recognize emerging situations more quickly and respond more effectively. When you've already thought through how you would handle various scenarios, you can act decisively while others are still trying to figure out what's happening. Strategic intelligence also requires developing what psychologists call counterfactual thinking. This is the ability to consider how things might have been different if various factors had changed. Most people accept outcomes as inevitable once they've occurred. Strategic thinkers constantly ask, what else could have happened, and what factors were most influential in determining the actual outcome. This helps them understand causation more accurately and make better predictions about future situations. Another crucial aspect of strategic intelligence is the ability to think at multiple time horizons simultaneously. Every decision you make has immediate consequences, medium-term implications, and long-term effects. Most people focus primarily on immediate outcomes, occasionally considering medium-term effects, and rarely thinking seriously about long-term consequences. Strategic thinkers evaluate every decision across all three time horizons and look for choices that optimize across all of them. This temporal thinking extends to understanding that different strategies are appropriate for different phases of any endeavor. The strategies that work when you're starting something new are different from those that work when you're scaling, which are different from those that work when you're maintaining and optimizing. Strategic thinkers adapt their approach based on what phase they're in, rather than rigidly sticking to one way of operating. Strategic intelligence also involves developing metacognitive awareness, which is the ability to think about your own thinking. This means being aware of your mental models, recognizing when they might be limiting you, and deliberately seeking out perspectives that challenge your assumptions. Most people are unconscious of their own thinking patterns and therefore trapped by them. Strategic thinkers make their mental processes visible to themselves so they can consciously improve them. Finally, strategic intelligence requires emotional intelligence, particularly the ability to understand how emotions affect decision-making, both in yourself and others. Emotions aren't the enemy of good strategy. They're crucial information about values, motivations, and priorities. But emotions can also cloud judgment and lead to poor decisions. Strategic thinkers learn to acknowledge emotions without being controlled by them, and to factor emotional dynamics into their strategic calculations. Chapter 3. The 7 Laws of Strategic Advantage. There are fundamental principles that govern how strategic advantage is created, maintained, and lost. These laws operate whether you're aware of them or not, but understanding them consciously gives you the power to work with them rather than against them. Master these 7 laws, and you'll have a framework for creating advantage in any situation. The first law is the law of positioning. Your position determines your options, and your options determine your outcomes. Most people focus on execution while neglecting positioning, which is like trying to win a race from the wrong starting line. Strategic positioning means putting yourself in situations where good outcomes are probable and bad outcomes are unlikely, where you have multiple options while your competitors have few, and where you can leverage your strengths while minimizing your weaknesses. Positioning isn't just about where you are. It's about how you're perceived. Sometimes, the best position is to be underestimated by your competition. Sometimes it's to be seen as indispensable by your allies. Sometimes it's to be viewed as unpredictable by those who might otherwise try to manipulate you. Strategic thinkers understand that perception is reality in human interactions, and they consciously shape how others see them to create strategic advantage. The second law is the law of timing. The same action can succeed brilliantly or fail completely depending on when it's taken. Most people either act too early, before conditions are favorable, or too late, after the opportunity has passed. Strategic timing requires understanding cycles, recognizing inflection points, and having the patience to wait for the right moment combined with the decisiveness to act when that moment arrives. Timing also involves understanding that different stakeholders operate on different time cycles. What seems urgent to you might be irrelevant to someone operating on a longer time horizon. What seems like a long-term investment to you might feel impossibly slow to someone who needs immediate results. Strategic thinkers align their timing with the natural rhythms of the systems they're operating within, rather than imposing their own preferred timeline. The third law is the law of concentration. Success comes from focusing your resources on the points where they can create the maximum impact. Most people spread their efforts too thinly, trying to do everything at once and achieving excellence at nothing. Strategic concentration means identifying the crucial few activities that will drive the majority of your results and ruthlessly eliminating or minimizing everything else. This law extends beyond just time and energy to include attention, relationships, and opportunities. You cannot pay meaningful attention to everything, so you must choose what deserves your focus. You cannot maintain deep relationships with everyone, so you must invest in the connections that matter most. You cannot pursue every opportunity, so you must select the ones that align with your strategic direction. The fourth law is the law of leverage. Small, well-placed efforts can create massive results when they're applied at the right points in a system. Most people try to succeed through brute force, working harder rather than working smarter. Strategic leverage means finding the fulcrum points where minimal input creates maximum output, whether that's through technology, relationships, systems, or positioning. Leverage often comes from understanding how different forces multiply each other. Your knowledge becomes more valuable when combined with the right relationships. Your relationships become more powerful when backed by relevant skills. Your skills become more impactful when applied in the right context. Strategic thinkers look for combinations that create exponential rather than additive effects. The fifth law is the law of adaptation. The environment is constantly changing, and strategies that worked in the past will not necessarily work in the future. Most people resist change and try to force their old approaches to work in new circumstances. Strategic adaptation means constantly sensing changes in your environment and adjusting your approach while maintaining your core objectives. Adaptation requires balancing stability and flexibility. You need enough consistency to build momentum and develop expertise, but enough flexibility to respond to changing conditions. This balance point is different for every situation and every person. And finding it requires ongoing experimentation and adjustment. The sixth law is the law of information asymmetry. Having better information than others gives you a significant advantage, but information is only valuable if you can act on it faster than others can acquire it. Most people either ignore information gathering entirely or get lost in analysis paralysis. Strategic information advantage comes from developing superior sources, processing information more effectively, and acting on insights before they become common knowledge. Information asymmetry also involves understanding what information others have and how they're likely to use it. Sometimes the most valuable insight is recognizing what your competitors don't know or are misinterpreting. Sometimes it's understanding the biases that cause others to misread situations that you can see clearly. The seventh law is the law of optionality. Having multiple options is more valuable than having one perfect plan. Most people create detailed plans and then try to execute them exactly as designed, which leaves them vulnerable when circumstances change. Strategic optionality means creating approaches that preserve your ability to choose between multiple paths as more information becomes available. This involves making investments that open up possibilities rather than closing them down, maintaining relationships across different groups rather than committing exclusively to one, and developing capabilities that are valuable in multiple scenarios rather than optimizing for a single outcome. Strategic thinkers understand that flexibility has value even when it comes at the cost of some efficiency. These 7 laws work together synergistically. Good positioning creates better timing opportunities. Proper timing enables effective concentration. Concentration amplifies leverage. Leverage facilitates adaptation. Adaptation generates information advantages. Information creates more options. And optionality improves positioning. Understanding these interconnections allows you to create strategies that are greater than the sum of their parts. Chapter 4. Reading the invisible game. Every situation you encounter is like an iceberg. What you see on the surface is only a small fraction of what's actually happening. Beneath the visible layer are hidden agendas, unspoken power dynamics, historical contexts, psychological patterns, and systemic forces that are often more important than the obvious elements everyone focuses on. Learning to read these invisible dimensions is what separates strategic thinkers from reactive responders. The first invisible layer is understanding the real motivations of the people involved. What people say they want and what they actually want are often completely different things. Someone might claim they want efficiency, but what they really want is control. Someone might say they want collaboration, but what they really want is validation. Someone might argue for a particular solution, but what they really want is to prove they're right. Reading motivations requires paying attention to patterns of behavior rather than isolated statements. Watch what people consistently do, not just what they occasionally say. Notice what energizes them and what drains them. Observe how they respond to different types of challenges and opportunities. Look for the underlying needs they're trying to meet through their actions, even when those actions seem irrational on the surface. The second invisible layer is power dynamics. Every group, organization, and relationship has informal power structures that are often more important than the official hierarchy. Understanding who really makes decisions, who influences the decision makers, who has veto power, and who serves as connectors between different factions is crucial for effective strategy. Power isn't just about formal authority. It can come from expertise, relationships, information, resources, or simply the ability to create problems for others. Sometimes the most powerful person in a room is the one who seems to have the least formal status but whom everyone else depends on for something crucial. Strategic thinkers map these informal power networks and position themselves advantageously within them. The third invisible layer is historical context. Every current situation is shaped by events that happened before you arrived, decisions that were made years ago, relationships that were formed or broken in the past, and patterns that have been established over time. Understanding this history helps you avoid repeating others' mistakes and capitalize on opportunities that others miss because they don't understand how the current situation evolved. Historical context also includes understanding the life cycle stage of whatever system you're dealing with. Is this organization in startup mode, growth mode, maturity mode, or decline mode? Is this relationship in its honeymoon phase, working phase, or crisis phase? Is this market emerging, maturing, or fragmenting? Different strategies work better at different stages, and trying to apply growth stage strategies to mature systems usually backfires. The fourth invisible layer is cultural dynamics. Every group develops its own culture, which includes unwritten rules about how things really work, what behaviors are rewarded or punished, what topics can be discussed openly, and what must remain underground. These cultural patterns often override formal policies and procedures. Culture manifests in language patterns, ritual behaviors, status symbols, and shared stories about what succeeds and what fails. Strategic thinkers learn to decode these cultural signals and work within cultural constraints rather than fighting against them. They understand that trying to implement strategies that violate deep cultural patterns is usually futile, no matter how logical those strategies might seem. The fifth invisible layer is psychological patterns. Individuals and groups have predictable psychological tendencies that influence how they perceive information, make decisions, and respond to different situations. Understanding these patterns allows you to predict behavior and design your approach accordingly. Some people are naturally cautious and need extensive proof before making decisions. Others are impulsive and make quick judgments based on limited information. Some people are motivated by competition and respond well to challenges. Others are motivated by collaboration and respond better to partnership approaches. Some people think concretely and need specific details. Others think abstractly and prefer big-picture frameworks. The sixth invisible layer is systemic forces. Every situation exists within larger systems that create pressures, constraints, and opportunities. Economic cycles, technological trends, regulatory changes, demographic shifts, and social movements all create currents that affect what's possible in any given situation. Strategic thinkers learn to identify these larger forces and position themselves to benefit from them rather than fighting against them. They understand that individual effort, no matter how intense, cannot overcome powerful systemic trends. But when you align your efforts with favorable systemic forces, you can achieve results that seem disproportionate to your input. The seventh invisible layer is feedback loops and unintended consequences. Every action creates reactions, which create further reactions, often in ways that weren't anticipated. Sometimes these feedback loops amplify your intended effects. Sometimes they create opposite effects. Sometimes they generate entirely unexpected outcomes. Reading The Invisible Game requires developing what intelligence analysts call structured analytical thinking. This means systematically considering alternative explanations for what you're observing, actively seeking out information that contradicts your initial impressions, and constantly updating your understanding as new data becomes available. It also requires cultivating sources of information that others don't have access to. This might mean building relationships with people at different levels of an organization, reading publications that aren't mainstream in your field, or developing expertise in areas that seem tangential but actually influence your main concerns. Most importantly, Reading the invisible game requires intellectual humility. The moment you think you've figured out what's really going on, you stop looking for new information and become vulnerable to surprises. Strategic thinkers maintain a healthy skepticism about their own understanding and continue gathering intelligence even when they think they have a clear picture. Chapter 5. The Science of Strategic Decision-Making. Most people make decisions using a combination of intuition, emotion, and whatever information happens to be immediately available. This approach works fine for routine choices with limited consequences, but it fails catastrophically when dealing with complex, high-stakes decisions where the wrong choice can derail years of progress. Strategic decision-making requires a more systematic approach that combines analytical rigor with practical wisdom. The foundation of strategic decision-making is properly framing the decision itself. Most people accept the way choices are initially presented to them, but strategic thinkers understand that how you frame a decision determines what options you consider and how you evaluate them. The same situation can be framed as a problem to solve, an opportunity to capture, a risk to manage, or a constraint to work around, and each framing leads to different solutions. Effective decision framing starts with clearly identifying what you're actually trying to decide. Are you choosing between specific alternatives? Or are you trying to figure out what alternatives are possible? Are you making a one-time choice? Or are you establishing a precedent that will influence future decisions? Are you optimizing for a single outcome? Or are you trying to balance multiple competing objectives? Once you've properly framed the decision, the next step is expanding your option set. Most people consider only the most obvious alternatives, which limits them to mediocre solutions. Strategic decision-making involves actively generating creative alternatives that others miss. This might mean combining elements from different standard approaches, adapting solutions from other contexts, or creating entirely new options that didn't exist before. Option generation requires getting past the false constraints that limit most people's thinking. Just because something hasn't been done before doesn't mean it's impossible. Just because something is difficult doesn't mean it's not worth attempting. Just because something requires resources you don't currently have doesn't mean those resources can't be acquired. Strategic thinkers question assumptions about what's possible and look for ways to transcend apparent limitations. The evaluation phase of strategic decision-making involves systematically assessing each option across multiple dimensions. This includes obvious factors like potential outcomes and resource requirements, but also subtler considerations like reversibility, option value, learning potential, and strategic positioning effects. Some choices are valuable not just for their immediate results, but for what they teach you or how they position you for future opportunities. Strategic evaluation also requires thinking probabilistically rather than deterministically. Most people evaluate options based on their most likely outcomes, but strategic thinkers consider the full range of possible results and their respective probabilities. An option with a moderate most likely outcome but significant upside potential might be superior to one with a higher most likely outcome but limited upside. This probabilistic thinking extends to considering how your decision might change the decision-making context for others. If you choose option A, how will your competitors respond? How will that response change the value of option A? Sometimes, the best choice is the one that puts your competitors in the most difficult position, even if it's not optimal in isolation. Risk assessment is a crucial component of strategic decision-making, but it requires understanding that risk and uncertainty are different things. Risk involves situations where you know the possible outcomes and their probabilities. Uncertainty involves situations where you don't know what might happen or how likely different outcomes are. Most real-world strategic decisions involve uncertainty rather than pure risk, which requires different analytical approaches. When dealing with uncertainty, strategic decision-makers use scenario planning to explore how different assumptions about unknown factors would affect the value of each option. They also look for choices that are robust across multiple scenarios rather than optimal in only one specific scenario. Sometimes the best decision is the one that keeps you in the game, regardless of how uncertainty resolves. Strategic decision-making also involves understanding the psychology of decision-making and actively counteracting common biases. Confirmation bias causes people to seek information that supports their preferred choice while ignoring contradictory evidence. Anchoring bias causes people to rely too heavily on the first piece of information they encounter. Availability bias causes people to overweight easily remembered examples. These biases can be counteracted through structured analytical processes. Red team analysis involves assigning someone to argue against your preferred choice. Devil's advocate processes involve systematically exploring what could go wrong with each option. Pre-mortem analysis involves imagining that a decision has failed and working backwards to understand why. Time pressure is one of the biggest enemies of good strategic decision-making. When people feel rushed, they revert to simplified heuristics and emotional responses. Strategic decision-makers create buffer time whenever possible and have frameworks for making rapid decisions when necessary. They also understand that some decisions can be made reversibly with relatively low cost, while others are irreversible and require more careful analysis. The implementation phase of strategic decision-making is just as important as the choice itself. The best decision in the world creates no value if it's poorly executed. Strategic implementation involves creating detailed action plans, identifying potential obstacles, establishing success metrics, and building in feedback mechanisms that allow for course correction. Strategic decision-makers also understand that making a decision is just the beginning of a process, not the end. They monitor outcomes, gather feedback, and adjust their approach based on what they learn. They're prepared to abandon a course of action if evidence suggests it's not working, rather than persisting with a failing strategy out of ego or sunk cost bias. Finally, strategic decision-making requires developing judgment, which is different from analysis. Analysis helps you understand the facts and evaluate options systematically. Judgment helps you know when to trust the analysis, when to override it based on intuition, and when to seek additional information before deciding. Judgment comes from experience, reflection, and learning from both successes and failures. Chapter 6. Thinking 3 moves ahead. The ability to anticipate future developments and think several moves ahead is what separates chess masters from casual players and strategic thinkers from reactive responders. While most people focus on immediate outcomes, strategic anticipation involves developing sophisticated mental models of how situations are likely to evolve over time. This isn't about predicting the future with certainty, which is impossible, but about understanding the logical progressions and likely consequences of current actions. The foundation of anticipatory thinking is understanding that every action creates a chain reaction. When you make a move, others respond to your move, which creates new situations that require further responses. Most people think only one step ahead, considering how others might react to their initial action. Strategic thinkers map out these sequences several moves deep, considering how their opponents might respond to their responses, and how they'll counter those counter-responses. This type of sequential thinking requires developing what game theorists call backward induction. Instead of thinking forward from your current position, you start with your desired end state and work backwards to identify the sequence of moves that could lead there. This reveals which early moves are actually productive toward your ultimate objective, and which are dead ends that seem appealing, but lead nowhere useful. Anticipatory thinking also involves understanding the concept of commitment and how it affects strategic interactions. When someone makes a credible commitment to a particular course of action, it changes everyone else's optimal strategies. If you can credibly commit to something that others know you'll follow through on, you can often get them to behave in ways that benefit you. But commitments are double-edged swords because they also limit your own flexibility. Strategic anticipation requires developing a deep understanding of the different types of players in any situation and how they're likely to behave. Some people are naturally cooperative and look for win-win solutions. Others are competitive and see every interaction as zero-sum. Some are driven by principles and will stick to their values even when it's costly. Others are purely pragmatic and will change positions based on incentives. Understanding player types helps you predict how different people will respond to various moves. The same action might provoke aggressive retaliation from a competitive player, cooperative problem-solving from a collaborative player, and principled resistance from a values-driven player. Strategic thinkers tailor their approach based on who they're dealing with and what motivates each player. Another crucial aspect of thinking ahead is understanding timing and tempo. In any strategic situation, there's a natural rhythm to how events unfold. Sometimes you want to accelerate this tempo to prevent others from organizing effective responses. Sometimes you want to slow things down to give yourself more time to prepare or to let unfavorable conditions change. Sometimes you want to disrupt the expected timing entirely to throw off opponents who are planning based on normal rhythms. Tempo control often involves understanding when to act and when to wait. Premature action can reveal your intentions and give opponents time to prepare countermeasures. But waiting too long can allow opportunities to pass or let opponents consolidate advantageous positions. Strategic timing requires reading the situation carefully and identifying the optimal moment to make your move. Anticipatory thinking also involves scenario branching, which means considering how different possible developments would affect your strategic position. At each decision point, multiple futures are possible depending on various factors beyond your control. Rather than betting everything on one scenario, strategic thinkers prepare for multiple contingencies and position themselves to benefit regardless of which scenario unfolds. This preparation involves creating contingent strategies that specify how you'll respond to different developments. If X happens, you'll do A. If Y happens, you'll do B. If both X and Y happen, you'll do C. Having these contingent plans allows you to respond quickly when situations change, while others are still trying to figure out what happened and what to do next. Strategic anticipation also requires understanding the difference between tactics and strategy. Tactics are the specific moves you make in particular situations. Strategy is the overall plan that coordinates those tactics toward a larger objective. Many people get so focused on tactical optimization that they lose sight of strategic direction. They win individual battles but lose the war because they weren't thinking about how each tactical victory fits into the larger strategic picture. The most sophisticated level of anticipatory thinking involves considering not just what others will do, but what they think you'll do, and what they think you think they'll do. This creates recursive loops of strategic reasoning that can become quite complex. Sometimes the optimal move is to do exactly what your opponent expects, because they've prepared for everything except the obvious. Sometimes it's to do something completely unexpected that they haven't planned for. Finally, thinking ahead requires maintaining flexibility while pursuing long-term objectives. The future rarely unfolds exactly as anticipated, so rigid plans often fail. Strategic thinkers create robust strategies that can adapt to changing circumstances while still moving toward their ultimate goals. They build optionality into their plans and avoid actions that would leave them trapped in unfavorable positions if circumstances change. Chapter 7. The Leverage Multiplier Effect. In physics, leverage allows you to move heavy objects with minimal force by applying that force at the right point with the right tool. The same principle applies to strategic thinking. Rather than trying to achieve results through brute force effort, strategic leverage involves finding the points where small, well-placed actions can create disproportionately large outcomes. Understanding and applying leverage is what allows some people to achieve extraordinary results, while others exhaust themselves with massive effort and limited results. The first type of strategic leverage is positional leverage. This comes from positioning yourself at crucial junctions in networks, systems, or processes where you can influence outcomes far beyond your apparent power or resources. Being at the right place at the right time isn't just luck. It's often the result of strategic positioning that puts you in the path of opportunities when they emerge. Positional leverage might involve becoming indispensable to key decision makers, positioning yourself as a connector between important groups that don't normally interact, or establishing yourself as an expert in an emerging field before it becomes mainstream. The key is identifying where value flows in a system and positioning yourself advantageously within those flows. The second type is informational leverage. Information that others don't have or haven't processed effectively can provide enormous strategic advantage. This isn't about insider trading or unethical information gathering, but about developing superior information processing capabilities, cultivating unique information sources, or seeing implications in publicly available information that others miss. Informational leverage often comes from pattern recognition across different domains. Someone who understands both technology and psychology might spot opportunities that pure technologists or pure psychologists would miss. Someone who follows both emerging markets and demographic trends might identify investment opportunities that specialists in either field wouldn't see. The third type is relationship leverage. Strategic relationships can multiply your capabilities far beyond what you could achieve individually. This isn't about using people, but about creating genuine value exchanges where everyone benefits. The right relationship can give you access to resources, information, opportunities, and capabilities that would take years to develop on your own. Building relationship leverage requires thinking beyond immediate transactions to long-term value creation. It means helping others achieve their objectives, even when there's no immediate benefit to you, because those relationships become valuable assets over time. It also means maintaining relationships during good times, so they're available during challenging times. The fourth type is technological leverage. Technology allows you to automate repetitive tasks, scale your efforts, and achieve results that would be impossible through manual effort alone. But technological leverage isn't just about using existing tools. It's about understanding how technology trends will evolve and positioning yourself to benefit from those trends. This might involve learning skills that will become more valuable as automation eliminates routine work, investing in technologies before they become mainstream, or building businesses that leverage technological trends rather than fighting against them. The key is understanding that technology is a force multiplier, not a solution in itself. The fifth type is capital leverage. This includes both financial capital and other forms of stored value, like reputation, credibility, and social capital. Financial leverage allows you to pursue opportunities that require resources beyond your current cash flow. Reputation leverage allows you to access opportunities that wouldn't be available to unknown individuals. Social capital leverage allows you to mobilize others' resources and efforts toward your objectives. Building capital leverage requires delayed gratification and long-term thinking. You must invest time and effort in building assets that will pay dividends in the future, rather than consuming everything immediately. This might mean reinvesting profits instead of spending them, building reputation through consistent high-quality work, or cultivating social capital through generous contributions to others' success. The sixth type is systemic leverage. This involves understanding how systems work and finding intervention points where small changes can create large effects. Systems often have leverage points where a small shift can change the entire system's behavior. These might be rules that govern the system, the goals the system is trying to achieve, or the paradigms that determine how people think about the system. Systemic leverage often requires thinking at a higher level than most people operate. Instead of trying to work harder within existing systems, you work to change the systems themselves. This might involve changing policies, shifting cultural norms, or introducing new frameworks that change how people think about problems. The seventh type is temporal leverage. This involves understanding timing and using it strategically. Sometimes the same action will have completely different effects depending on when it's taken. Early action can establish first-mover advantages. Late action can benefit from others' mistakes and learning. Well-timed action can benefit from favorable conditions that amplify results. Temporal leverage also involves understanding how your current actions create future optionality. Some investments of time and energy pay off immediately, while others create capabilities or positions that become valuable later. Strategic thinkers balance immediate results with future positioning, ensuring they're building leverage for long-term success while meeting short-term needs. Combining different types of leverage creates exponential effects. When you have strong relationships that give you access to unique information that helps you identify emerging technological trends that you can pursue using available capital from a strategically advantageous position, the combined effect is far greater than any single type of leverage alone. The key to leverage thinking is always asking whether there's a way to achieve your objective with less direct effort by finding the right leverage points. Before committing to a brute force approach, strategic thinkers systematically explore whether positioning, information, relationships, technology, capital, systems, or timing could provide a more elegant solution. Finally, leverage thinking requires understanding that leverage amplifies both successes and failures. The same factors that can create extraordinary positive results can also create extraordinary negative results if applied incorrectly. This means that leverage must be combined with careful risk management and the wisdom to know when to use it and when to avoid it. Chapter 8. Strategic communication and influence. Communication is never just about transmitting information. Every interaction is a strategic opportunity to influence perceptions, build relationships, advance objectives, and position yourself advantageously for future interactions. Most people communicate reactively, saying whatever comes to mind in response to immediate circumstances. Strategic communicators approach every conversation with intentionality, understanding that how they communicate is often more important than what they communicate. The foundation of strategic communication is understanding that people make decisions based on emotion and then justify those decisions with logic. Facts and rational arguments are important, but they rarely change minds by themselves. People need to feel something before they think something, and they need to trust the messenger before they believe the message. This means that effective strategic communication must engage both emotional and logical channels simultaneously. Understanding your audience is crucial for strategic communication. Different people process information differently, make decisions using different criteria, and are motivated by different factors. Some people respond best to data and logical arguments. Others are moved by stories and emotional appeals. Some need to see social proof that others have already embraced an idea. Others prefer to feel like pioneers adopting something new. Strategic communicators develop the ability to rapidly assess their audience and adapt their communication style accordingly. This doesn't mean being manipulative or dishonest, but rather presenting authentic messages in ways that resonate with how different people naturally think and make decisions. It's the difference between speaking your language and speaking theirs. Framing is one of the most powerful tools in strategic communication. The same information can be presented in multiple ways that lead to completely different conclusions. Whether you describe a glass as half full or half empty, conveys the same factual information but creates different emotional responses. Strategic communicators understand that how they frame information often matters more than the information itself. Effective framing involves understanding the values, priorities, and concerns of your audience, and presenting your message in ways that align with those factors. If you're communicating with someone who values efficiency, you frame your proposal in terms of time savings and streamlined processes. If you're communicating with someone who values relationships, you frame the same proposal in terms of improved collaboration and team dynamics. Timing is another crucial element of strategic communication. The same message can be received completely differently depending on when it's delivered. People are more receptive to certain types of messages when they're in particular emotional states or facing specific challenges. Strategic communicators pay attention to timing and look for optimal moments to deliver important messages. This includes understanding both immediate timing within conversations and broader timing within larger contexts. Sometimes you need to plant seeds early and let them grow before making direct requests. Sometimes you need to wait for the right moment when your audience is naturally receptive to your message. Sometimes you need to create the right conditions before attempting to communicate at all. Strategic influence often works best when it doesn't feel like influence. People resist being pushed but will move in directions they feel they've chosen themselves. This requires what psychologists call the illusion of choice, where you present options in ways that naturally lead people toward your preferred outcome while allowing them to feel they're making autonomous decisions. This might involve presenting 3 options where 2 are clearly inferior, making your preferred choice seem obvious by comparison. It might involve asking questions that lead people to discover insights themselves rather than telling them what to think. It might involve sharing stories that allow people to draw their own conclusions rather than making direct arguments. Building credibility is essential for long-term strategic influence. Credibility comes from demonstrated competence, consistent reliability, and genuine concern for others' interests. People are influenced by those they trust, and trust is built through repeated positive interactions over time. This means that strategic communication is always a long-term game, not just about winning individual conversations. Credibility also requires authenticity. People have sophisticated unconscious detectors for authenticity, and attempts to fake sincerity or manipulate others usually backfire. Strategic communicators align their communication with their genuine values and objectives, finding ways to be both authentic and effective rather than choosing between them. Understanding power dynamics is crucial for strategic communication. The same message will be received differently depending on the relative status and power of the communicator and audience. Sometimes you need to communicate up to people with more formal authority. Sometimes you need to communicate across to peers. Sometimes you need to communicate down to people who report to you. Each situation requires different approaches. When communicating up, you often need to demonstrate respect for the other person's time and authority, while still advancing your objectives. When communicating across, you might need to emphasize mutual benefits and collaborative approaches. When communicating down, you need to be mindful of how your power affects others' ability to respond honestly. Strategic communicators also understand the importance of non-verbal communication. Tone, body language, facial expressions, and other non-verbal cues often convey more information than words themselves. People unconsciously mirror the energy and emotional state of those they're communicating with. So managing your own non-verbal communication can influence the entire dynamic of an interaction. This extends to written communication, where factors like word choice, sentence structure, and formatting convey emotional undertones that affect how messages are received. Strategic communicators pay attention to these subtle factors and use them consciously to support their communication objectives. Finally, strategic communication requires understanding that every interaction creates precedents for future interactions. How you handle one conversation affects how people expect you to behave in subsequent conversations. How you treat one person influences how others expect to be treated. This means that strategic communicators think beyond immediate objectives to consider the long-term relationship and reputation effects of their communication choices. Chapter 9. Crisis, Navigation, and Opportunity Creation. Crisis and opportunity are often two sides of the same coin. What appears to be a devastating setback can become the catalyst for breakthrough success, while what seems like a fantastic opportunity can lead to strategic disaster. The difference lies not in the circumstances themselves, but in how you perceive, interpret, and respond to those circumstances. Strategic thinkers develop the ability to navigate crises effectively, while simultaneously identifying and creating opportunities that others miss. The first principle of crisis navigation is understanding that crisis is inevitable. No matter how well you plan, how carefully you prepare, or how perfectly you execute, unexpected challenges will arise. Markets will shift unexpectedly. Key relationships will change. Technology will disrupt established patterns. External events will create new constraints. Accepting this reality allows you to prepare psychologically and structurally for crisis, rather than being blindsided when it occurs. Crisis preparation involves building redundancy and resilience into your strategies before you need them. This might mean maintaining multiple income streams, so you're not dependent on a single source. It might mean developing diverse skills, so you can adapt to changing requirements. It might mean building strong relationships across different networks, so you have support when you need it. The key is creating buffers and alternatives before crisis forces you to scramble for them. When crisis hits, the first strategic imperative is maintaining clarity of thought. Crisis tends to trigger fight or flight responses that narrow attention and reduce cognitive flexibility. Most people either panic and make impulsive decisions, or freeze and fail to take necessary action. Strategic crisis navigation requires developing the ability to remain calm and think clearly precisely when everyone else is losing their composure. This mental clarity allows you to assess the situation accurately rather than reacting to your fears about the situation. What exactly has changed? What new constraints or opportunities has the crisis created? What resources do you still have available? What options remain open? Crisis often looks worse initially than it actually is, because uncertainty amplifies perceived threats. Clear assessment helps distinguish between real problems and imaginary disasters. The second principle is speed of response. In crisis situations, conditions change rapidly, and windows of opportunity open and close quickly. Strategic thinkers prepare decision-making frameworks that allow them to act quickly when speed is essential. This doesn't mean making hasty decisions, but rather having systems in place that enable rapid analysis and decisive action when circumstances demand it. Speed of response also means being willing to make decisions with incomplete information. In stable situations, you can often gather extensive data before choosing a course of action. In crisis, waiting for complete information usually means missing the opportunity to respond effectively. Strategic crisis navigation involves developing judgment about when you have enough information to act and when the cost of delay exceeds the benefit of additional analysis. The third principle is focus and prioritization. Crisis tends to create multiple urgent problems simultaneously, and trying to address everything at once usually means solving nothing effectively. Strategic crisis navigation requires ruthless prioritization, identifying which problems are truly critical and which can be temporarily ignored or delegated to others. This prioritization should focus on actions that preserve the most options for future decision-making. Some crisis responses commit you to particular paths that limit future flexibility. Others keep multiple paths open while addressing immediate needs. When possible, choose responses that solve immediate problems while maintaining strategic flexibility for whatever comes next. Crisis also creates unique opportunities that don't exist during normal times. When established patterns break down, new possibilities emerge. When traditional players are distracted by crisis management, space opens for new approaches. When markets shift rapidly, competitive advantages can be gained or lost quickly. Strategic thinkers train themselves to look for these opportunities, even while managing crisis challenges. Opportunity identification during crisis requires shifting your perspective from what you're losing to what you might gain. Instead of focusing only on protecting existing positions, consider what new positions might become available. Instead of just trying to return to the previous status quo, explore whether there might be a better status quo worth moving toward. This opportunity mindset also applies to learning and capability development. Crisis often forces rapid learning and adaptation that would be impossible under normal circumstances. Skills that might take years to develop gradually can be acquired in months when necessity demands it. Crisis can accelerate personal and organizational development in ways that stable periods cannot. Strategic opportunity creation involves understanding that you don't have to wait for circumstances to present opportunities. You can create opportunities by changing the game rather than just playing it better. This might involve introducing new solutions to problems that others are struggling with, connecting parties who need each other but haven't found each other, or creating value in ways that weren't previously possible. Opportunity creation often involves seeing possibilities that others miss because they're constrained by conventional thinking. Most people assume that current limitations are permanent and current rules are unchangeable. Strategic thinkers question these assumptions and look for ways to transcend apparent constraints through creative approaches. The most sophisticated level of strategic thinking involves learning to create opportunity through crisis. This means intentionally introducing controlled disruption to existing patterns when those patterns are limiting your progress. Sometimes you need to create a crisis in order to create the conditions for breakthrough change. This approach requires careful calculation because created crises can spiral beyond your control. The key is ensuring that you're better prepared for the crisis than others are, so that the disruption advantages you more than it disadvantages competitors. This might involve building capabilities that will be valuable during the crisis before introducing the disruption. Finally, both crisis navigation and opportunity creation require developing what psychologists call post-traumatic growth. This is the ability to emerge from difficult experiences stronger, wiser, and more capable than you were before. Strategic thinkers don't just survive crises, they use them as catalysts for development that wouldn't have been possible otherwise. Chapter 10. Building your strategic operating system. Strategic thinking isn't just a skill you use occasionally when facing major decisions. It's a complete operating system for how you approach life, work, and relationships. Just as your computer needs an operating system to coordinate all its various programs and functions, you need a strategic operating system to coordinate all your various goals, activities, and decisions toward coherent outcomes. Building this system requires integrating strategic principles into your daily routines, decision-making processes, and long-term planning. The foundation of your strategic operating system is your personal mission and value framework. This isn't about creating inspirational statements for wall posters, but about developing clear, actionable principles that guide decision-making when you're facing complex choices with competing priorities. Your strategic framework should help you quickly identify which opportunities are worth pursuing and which are distractions, which relationships are worth investing in and which are energy drains, which skills are worth developing, and which are tangential to your objectives. This framework needs to be specific enough to provide real guidance, but flexible enough to adapt as circumstances change. It should include both aspirational elements that pull you toward your highest potential and practical constraints that keep you grounded in reality. Most importantly, it should be genuinely yours, reflecting your authentic values and objectives rather than what you think you should want or what others expect from you. The second component is a systematic approach to information gathering and environmental scanning. Strategic thinkers don't wait for important information to find them accidentally. They create structured processes for staying aware of trends, opportunities, and threats in their areas of interest. This might involve regular reading schedules, strategic relationships that provide insider perspectives, or systematic analysis of leading indicators in your field. Information gathering should be both broad and deep. You need enough breadth to spot connections and opportunities that specialists might miss, but enough depth in key areas to make accurate assessments and predictions. The key is developing filters that help you distinguish between signal and noise, focusing on information that has strategic implications rather than just consuming information for entertainment or general education. The third component is decision-making frameworks that help you make consistent, high-quality choices under various conditions. Different types of decisions require different approaches. Routine decisions should be systematized to reduce decision fatigue. Major decisions should use structured analysis to ensure you consider all relevant factors. Crisis decisions should have predetermined triggers and response protocols. These frameworks should include both analytical tools and intuitive check processes. Sometimes the numbers clearly point to one choice, but something feels wrong about it. Sometimes your gut strongly favors one option, but you can't rationally justify it. Strategic decision-making frameworks help you navigate these conflicts and combine analytical and intuitive insights effectively. The fourth component is goal setting and planning systems that connect your daily actions to your long-term objectives. Most people either focus so much on long-term goals that they neglect immediate necessities, or get so caught up in daily urgencies that they lose sight of strategic direction. Your strategic operating system should bridge these time horizons, ensuring that your daily activities contribute to weekly progress. Your weekly progress supports monthly objectives, and your monthly achievements advance annual goals. This requires developing the ability to think and plan at multiple timescales simultaneously. Some activities pay off immediately, others take months or years to mature. Some goals require consistent daily effort, others involve sporadic, intense efforts at the right moments. Your planning system should accommodate both types and help you balance short-term and long-term considerations. The fifth component is resource allocation principles that help you invest your time, energy, attention, and money strategically. You cannot do everything, pursue every opportunity, or maintain every relationship at the same level of intensity. Strategic resource allocation means constantly choosing where to focus your limited resources for maximum impact. This involves understanding the concept of opportunity cost. Every choice to do one thing is simultaneously a choice not to do something else. Strategic thinkers make these trade-offs consciously rather than accidentally, regularly evaluating whether their current resource allocation still makes sense given their objectives and changing circumstances. The sixth component is feedback and adjustment mechanisms that help you learn from experience and improve your strategic thinking over time. This includes both formal review processes where you systematically evaluate outcomes and informal reflection habits that help you extract lessons from daily experiences. Strategic learning requires honest assessment of both successes and failures. Success can be just as misleading as failure if you don't understand what caused it. Sometimes you succeed despite poor decisions because of luck or favorable circumstances. Sometimes you fail despite good decisions because of factors beyond your control. Understanding these distinctions helps you improve your decision-making rather than just celebrating or mourning outcomes. The seventh component is relationship and network management systems that help you build and maintain the strategic relationships that multiply your capabilities. This isn't about networking in the shallow sense of collecting contacts, but about developing genuine relationships that create mutual value over time. Strategic relationship building requires thinking about what you can offer others, not just what you hope to gain. It also requires maintaining relationships during good times, so they're available during challenging times. Your relationship system should help you stay in meaningful contact with important people, identify opportunities to help others achieve their objectives, and recognize when and how to ask for assistance when you need it. Finally, your strategic operating system should include stress testing and scenario planning processes that help you prepare for various possible futures. This involves regularly asking yourself, what would happen if key assumptions proved wrong, if major opportunities or threats emerged, or if external circumstances changed dramatically? This preparation isn't about becoming paranoid or pessimistic, but about building resilience and adaptability into your approach. When you've already considered how you would respond to various scenarios, you can act more quickly and confidently when those scenarios actually occur. Your strategic operating system should help you remain proactive rather than purely reactive, regardless of what circumstances you encounter. Chapter 11. Advanced Psychological Strategy and Mental Warfare. The most sophisticated level of strategic thinking involves understanding and influencing the psychological dynamics that drive human behavior. While basic strategy focuses on external moves and countermoves, advanced psychological strategy operates at the level of perception, emotion, and cognition. This isn't about manipulation or deception, but about understanding how human psychology works and designing your approach to work with these natural tendencies rather than against them. The foundation of psychological strategy is understanding that people don't respond to objective reality. They respond to their perception of reality. Two people can face identical circumstances and have completely different responses based on how they interpret and frame those circumstances. This means that influencing perception can be more powerful than changing actual conditions, and that understanding how others perceive situations gives you tremendous strategic advantage. Perception is shaped by numerous psychological biases and mental shortcuts that people use to process complex information quickly. The availability heuristic causes people to overestimate the probability of events they can easily remember. The confirmation bias causes people to seek information that supports their existing beliefs while ignoring contradictory evidence. The anchoring effect causes people to rely too heavily on the first piece of information they encounter when making decisions. Strategic thinkers learn to recognize these biases in others and use them ethically to influence outcomes. If you want someone to perceive a risk as significant, you provide vivid, memorable examples of that risk materializing. If you want someone to accept a proposal, you anchor their expectations with a more extreme initial proposal that makes your actual proposal seem reasonable by comparison. If you want someone to believe in a particular solution, you present information that confirms their existing beliefs about the problem. The psychology of commitment and consistency is another powerful tool in advanced strategy. People have a deep psychological need to appear consistent with their previous statements and behaviors. Once someone has committed to a position publicly, they will go to great lengths to justify that commitment, even when evidence suggests they were wrong. Understanding this allows you to seek small initial commitments that naturally lead to larger commitments over time. This principle works because changing your mind requires admitting that your previous judgment was flawed, which threatens self-esteem and social status. It's psychologically easier to rationalize staying committed to a questionable decision than to admit error and change course. Strategic thinkers use this by seeking agreement on small points that establish precedents for larger agreements, creating psychological momentum toward their desired outcomes. Social proof is another fundamental psychological principle that drives strategic outcomes. People look to others' behavior as evidence of what's appropriate or effective in ambiguous situations. When people are uncertain about what to do, they assume that others who seem similar to them have made good decisions, and they copy those decisions. This creates powerful herding effects where individual choices create collective momentum. Strategic application of social proof involves demonstrating that credible others have already embraced the course of action you're advocating. This might mean showcasing testimonials from respected figures, highlighting adoption rates among relevant peer groups, or creating visible evidence of growing momentum behind your position. The key is choosing social proof sources that your target audience actually respects and identifies with. The psychology of scarcity and urgency also plays a crucial role in strategic influence. People value things more highly when they believe those things are scarce, or when they face deadlines for accessing them. This isn't just about marketing tactics, but about fundamental human psychology. The fear of missing out triggers rapid decision-making and reduces the tendency to procrastinate or overanalyze. However, artificial scarcity backfires if people recognize it as manipulation. Effective strategic use of scarcity involves highlighting genuine constraints and natural deadlines rather than creating fake limitations. This might mean emphasizing that a particular opportunity is available only during a specific time window, that resources for a project are genuinely limited, or that competitive dynamics will change if action isn't taken quickly. Authority and expertise create another powerful psychological dynamic. People defer to perceived experts and authority figures, especially in areas where they feel uncertain about their own judgment. This deference can override people's natural skepticism and critical thinking. Strategic thinkers establish credibility and authority in relevant domains, then leverage that credibility to influence decisions in related areas. Building authority requires demonstrating genuine expertise through consistent, high-quality work, accurate predictions, and valuable insights. It also involves understanding the symbols and signals that communicate expertise to your target audience. Sometimes expertise is communicated through credentials and formal recognition. Sometimes it's communicated through demonstrated results and peer acknowledgement. Sometimes It's communicated through unique insights and perspectives that others don't have. The psychology of reciprocity creates obligations that can be strategically valuable. When someone does something beneficial for you, you feel psychologically obligated to return the favor. This creates opportunities to build influence by providing value to others before asking for anything in return. The key is providing value that feels generous and voluntary, rather than calculated and transactional. Strategic reciprocity involves understanding what different people value and finding ways to provide that value in ways that feel genuine and thoughtful. Sometimes people value information or insights. Sometimes they value connections to other people. Sometimes they value recognition or status. Sometimes they value practical assistance or resources. Understanding what motivates each person allows you to provide value in ways that create the strongest reciprocal obligations. Framing effects represent one of the most powerful psychological tools for strategic influence. The same information can be presented in ways that lead to completely different conclusions and decisions. Whether you describe a medical treatment as having a 90% success rate or a 10% failure rate, conveys identical information but creates different emotional responses and decision patterns. Strategic framing involves understanding your audience's values, fears, and priorities, then presenting information in ways that align with those psychological factors. If your audience values security, you frame your proposal in terms of risk reduction and stability. If they value growth, you frame the same proposal in terms of opportunity and expansion. If they value fairness, you emphasize equitable outcomes and inclusive processes. The most advanced level of psychological strategy involves understanding and influencing group dynamics. Individual psychology operates differently when people are part of groups. Groupthink can cause intelligent individuals to make poor collective decisions. Social proof effects can create cascades where early adopters influence many others. Authority dynamics can cause groups to defer to leaders even when those leaders are wrong. Strategic group influence requires understanding roles that different people play in group decision-making. Some people are early adopters who are willing to try new approaches. Some are influencers who shape others' opinions. Some are skeptics who raise concerns and objections. Some are followers who go along with whatever the group decides. Identifying these roles and tailoring your approach to each type of person can determine whether groups embrace or resist your proposals. Finally, advanced psychological strategy requires understanding your own psychological biases and defensive mechanisms. The same psychological principles that allow you to influence others also make you vulnerable to influence from others. Strategic thinkers develop self-awareness about their own mental patterns and create systems to protect themselves from manipulation while using psychological insights ethically to achieve legitimate objectives. Chapter 12. Strategic Alliance Building and Network Effects. No one achieves significant success entirely alone. The most accomplished individuals throughout history have been masters at building strategic alliances, developing powerful networks, and creating collaborative relationships that multiply their individual capabilities far beyond what they could achieve through solo effort. In our interconnected world, your network truly is your net worth. But building valuable networks requires much more sophisticated thinking than simply collecting contacts or attending networking events. Strategic alliance building begins with understanding that relationships are assets that appreciate or depreciate based on how they're managed over time. Like financial investments, relationships require ongoing attention, regular deposits of value, and strategic allocation of resources to generate optimal returns. The most valuable relationships are those where both parties consistently benefit from the association, creating positive feedback loops that strengthen the relationship over time. The foundation of strategic networking is adopting an abundance mindset rather than a scarcity mindset. Scarcity-minded people approach relationships as zero-sum games where helping others succeed somehow diminishes their own prospects. Abundance-minded people understand that success is not finite, and that helping others achieve their objectives often creates opportunities for mutual benefit that wouldn't exist otherwise. This mindset shift changes how you approach relationship building entirely. Instead of asking what someone can do for you, you ask what you can do for them. Instead of trying to extract value from every interaction, you look for ways to provide value consistently over time. Instead of keeping score in individual transactions, you focus on building long-term relationships that create value for everyone involved. Strategic relationship building requires understanding the different types of value you can provide to others. Sometimes people need information or insights that you have access to. Sometimes they need connections to other people in your network. Sometimes they need resources, assistance, or expertise that you can provide. Sometimes they need emotional support, encouragement, or validation during challenging periods. The key is developing a sophisticated understanding of what different people value and finding authentic ways to provide that value consistently. This requires paying attention to others' goals, challenges, interests, and communication styles. It means remembering important details about people's lives and following up on previous conversations. It means being genuinely interested in others' success rather than just pretending to care as a networking tactic. Network effects occur when the value of a network increases exponentially as more valuable people join it. The classic example is telephone networks, where each additional telephone makes all existing telephones more valuable because there are more people you can call. The same principle applies to professional and social networks. Each valuable person you add to your network potentially connects with every other person in your network, creating value for everyone. Understanding network effects means thinking beyond direct one-to-one relationships to consider how you can create value by connecting others in your network. When you introduce two people who can help each other, you create value for both of them while strengthening your relationship with each. When you organize events or groups that bring together interesting people, you create network effects that benefit everyone involved, while positioning yourself as a valuable connector. Strategic alliance building often involves identifying complementary strengths and weaknesses that create opportunities for mutually beneficial partnerships. You might be excellent at generating ideas, but struggle with implementation. Someone else might be outstanding at execution, but need better strategic direction. Partnerships that combine complementary capabilities can achieve results that neither party could accomplish alone. These partnerships work best when they're based on genuine respect for each other's contributions rather than trying to exploit others' weaknesses. The goal is creating synergistic relationships where 1 + 1 equals more than 2. Not parasitic relationships where one person benefits at another's expense. This requires honest assessment of your own strengths and limitations and clear communication about what you bring to relationships and what you hope to gain. Timing is crucial in strategic alliance building. The same relationship can be incredibly valuable or completely worthless, depending on when it's formed and how circumstances evolve. Early relationships with people who later become successful can provide enormous advantages, but only if you maintain those relationships during their rise rather than trying to reconnect after they've achieved success. This requires the ability to identify potential before it's obvious to everyone else. Some people have the capability to achieve great things, but haven't yet found the right opportunity or developed the right skills. Some people are in industries or positions that are about to become much more valuable due to technological or social trends. Some people have unique combinations of background and expertise that will become valuable as circumstances change. Strategic networking also requires understanding the difference between strong ties and weak ties and the different values that each provides. Strong ties are people you interact with regularly and know well. They're valuable for collaboration, support, and detailed information sharing. Weak ties are people you know casually or interact with infrequently. They're valuable for accessing different networks, learning about opportunities in other domains, and gaining diverse perspectives. Most people focus primarily on strengthening their existing strong ties while neglecting the cultivation of weak ties. But research shows that weak ties are often more valuable for discovering new opportunities because they expose you to information and possibilities that don't exist within your immediate circle. Strategic networking involves maintaining a portfolio of both strong and weak ties and allocating relationship-building efforts strategically across both categories. Digital platforms have transformed networking by making it easier to maintain weak ties and discover new connections. But they've also created new challenges. Online networking can feel less authentic than in-person relationship building, and the volume of possible connections can become overwhelming. Strategic digital networking requires being selective about platforms and connections, focusing on quality interactions rather than quantity metrics. The most sophisticated level of strategic alliance building involves creating ecosystem effects where your network becomes self-reinforcing and generates value independent of your direct involvement. This might involve establishing communities, organizing regular events, or creating platforms that bring valuable people together consistently. When you create structures that generate ongoing value for network members, you position yourself at the center of valuable networks rather than just being a member of others' networks. Geographic considerations are increasingly important in strategic networking as remote work and digital communication reduce the advantages of physical proximity while creating new opportunities for global connections. Some relationships still benefit from regular face-to-face interaction, while others can be maintained effectively through digital channels. Strategic networkers understand which relationships require physical proximity and which can be managed remotely. Industry and functional diversity in your network provides access to different perspectives, opportunities, and resources that wouldn't be available within homogeneous networks. While deep relationships within your primary field are important for advancement within that field, relationships across different industries and functions provide opportunities for innovation, career transitions, and unique collaborations. Finally, strategic alliance building requires understanding that networks are dynamic systems that require ongoing maintenance and evolution. People's circumstances change, industries evolve, and new opportunities emerge that require different types of relationships. Strategic networkers regularly evaluate their networks, identify gaps that need to be filled, and invest in developing new relationships while maintaining valuable existing ones. Chapter 13. Long-term, strategic positioning, and legacy building. Most people think tactically, focusing on immediate problems and short-term goals. Some people think strategically, considering medium-term implications and competitive dynamics. But the most successful individuals think in terms of decades, building positions and capabilities that compound over time to create sustainable competitive advantages and lasting impact. Long-term strategic positioning is about playing the infinite game rather than just winning finite games. The foundation of long-term thinking is understanding that your current position is not your permanent position. Every skill you develop, every relationship you build, every reputation you establish, and every asset you accumulate is positioning you for future opportunities that don't yet exist. The question isn't just whether your current activities are immediately productive, but whether they're building capabilities and positions that will be valuable 10 or 20 years from now. This requires developing what economists call dynamic capabilities, which are not just the ability to do specific things well, but the ability to learn new skills, adapt to changing circumstances, and reconfigure your resources as conditions evolve. In rapidly changing environments, static capabilities become obsolete quickly. Dynamic capabilities allow you to maintain relevance and effectiveness regardless of how external conditions change. Long-term positioning involves understanding and anticipating megatrends that will reshape entire industries and societies over extended periods. These might include technological developments like artificial intelligence and biotechnology, demographic shifts like aging populations and urbanization, environmental changes like climate change, and resource depletion, or social movements like increasing emphasis on sustainability and equality. While you cannot predict exactly how these trends will unfold, you can position yourself to benefit from them regardless of their specific manifestations. This might mean developing skills that will be valuable across multiple scenarios, building relationships with people who are influential in emerging fields, or creating assets that will become more valuable as trends accelerate. Strategic positioning also requires understanding the concept of option value. Some investments of time, energy, or resources don't pay off immediately, but create valuable options for the future. Learning a new language might not provide immediate benefits, but it opens up possibilities for international opportunities later. Building relationships in adjacent industries might not seem directly relevant to your current work, but those relationships might become crucial if you decide to change directions. Option-creating activities often look inefficient in the short term because their value is speculative and uncertain. But in uncertain environments, having more options is often more valuable than optimizing for any single scenario. Strategic long-term thinking involves balancing immediate productivity with option creation, ensuring that you're building capabilities and positions that preserve flexibility for unknown future opportunities. Reputation and credibility compound over time when managed strategically. Every professional interaction, every piece of work you produce, and every commitment you make or break contributes to how others perceive your capabilities and character. These perceptions accumulate into reputation, which becomes an increasingly valuable asset as your career progresses. Building long-term reputation requires consistency between your stated values and your actual behavior, even when that consistency is costly in the short term. It requires delivering high-quality work consistently, even on projects that seem minor or unimportant. It requires treating all people with respect and professionalism, even those who cannot immediately help you. These behaviors create compound interest effects, where your reputation grows faster over time. Long-term strategic positioning also involves understanding how to build and leverage institutional knowledge. Every organization, industry, and community has accumulated wisdom about what works, what doesn't work, and why certain patterns persist over time. People who understand these institutional patterns can navigate systems more effectively and avoid repeating historical mistakes. Institutional knowledge includes formal knowledge like documented processes and written policies, but more importantly includes informal knowledge like unwritten rules, cultural norms, and relationship dynamics that actually determine how things work. This knowledge is often held by long-term participants who have observed patterns over multiple cycles and learned what really drives outcomes. Creating intellectual property and thought leadership positions you advantageously for long-term success, because ideas and insights can scale independently of your personal time and effort. When you develop unique frameworks, methodologies, or perspectives that others find valuable, you create assets that can generate value through teaching, consulting, writing, speaking, and licensing. Building thought leadership requires consistently producing valuable insights and sharing them generously, rather than hoarding them for personal advantage. The more you teach others and help them succeed, the more your reputation grows as someone worth paying attention to. This creates positive feedback loops where your increased reputation gives you access to better information and opportunities, which enables you to produce even more valuable insights. Long-term positioning requires strategic thinking about industry evolution and career portability. Some skills and experiences are highly specific to particular companies, industries, or technologies. Others are transferable across multiple contexts and remain valuable even as specific conditions change. Strategic career development involves building a portfolio of capabilities that includes both deep expertise in valuable domains and transferable skills that provide flexibility. This portfolio approach extends to relationship building, asset accumulation, and reputation development. Having all your relationships within a single industry makes you vulnerable if that industry declines. Having all your assets in a single category exposes you to systemic risks. Having your reputation tied to a single company or technology makes you vulnerable to changes in that specific area. Geographic diversification is increasingly important as economic and political conditions become more volatile and unpredictable. Building relationships, reputation, and opportunities across multiple geographic regions provides options if conditions in any single location become unfavorable. This doesn't necessarily require physical relocation, but might involve developing virtual relationships, understanding different markets, or creating location-independent income streams. Legacy thinking involves considering how your current actions will affect not just your own future, but the future of others who matter to you. This might include family members, colleagues, organizations you care about, or broader communities and causes. Legacy-minded strategic thinking asks whether your current path will leave the world better than you found it, and whether the positions you're building will enable you to make meaningful contributions over time. Long-term strategic positioning also requires understanding sustainability and regeneration rather than just extraction and consumption. Strategies that depend on depleting finite resources, burning out relationships, or damaging systems that you depend on are self-limiting. Sustainable strategies create value in ways that strengthen rather than weaken the foundations they're built on. Finally, long-term positioning requires accepting that some of the most important investments you make will not pay off within your lifetime. The institutions you help build, the people you mentor, the knowledge you create, and the positive changes you catalyze may have their greatest impact years or decades after you're gone. True strategic thinking involves contributing to positive developments that transcend your personal timeline and create lasting value for others. Chapter 14. Mastering Strategic Execution and Implementation. The most brilliant strategy in the world creates no value if it cannot be executed effectively. While much strategic thinking focuses on analysis, planning, and decision-making, the ultimate test of any strategy is whether it can be translated into consistent action that produces desired results. Strategic execution is where most strategies fail, not because the strategies were poorly conceived, but because they were poorly implemented. The gap between strategy and execution exists because they require different skills and mindsets. Strategic thinking is conceptual, analytical, and focused on possibilities. Strategic execution is practical, operational, and focused on realities. Many people excel at one or the other, but struggle to bridge between them effectively. Mastering strategic execution requires developing capabilities in both domains and creating systems that connect them. The foundation of strategic execution is translating abstract objectives into specific, actionable tasks that can be completed by real people with finite time and resources. Most strategic plans fail because they remain at too high a level of abstraction. They specify what should be accomplished, but not how it will be accomplished, who will accomplish it, when it will be completed, or what resources will be required. Effective execution planning requires breaking down strategic objectives into progressively more specific levels of detail, until you reach tasks that can be completed by individuals within defined timeframes. This breakdown process reveals resource requirements, identifies potential obstacles, and exposes unrealistic assumptions that weren't apparent at the strategic level. This detailed planning also reveals dependencies between different components of your strategy. Some tasks cannot begin until others are completed. Some resources are required by multiple activities and must be allocated carefully. Some people are critical to multiple components and represent potential bottlenecks. Understanding these dependencies allows you to sequence activities effectively and identify critical path elements that could delay the entire strategy if not managed carefully. Strategic execution requires building systems and processes that ensure consistent progress, even when motivation fluctuates or circumstances change. Relying on willpower and enthusiasm to drive execution works in the short term, but fails over extended periods when initial excitement fades and obstacles emerge. Systematic execution involves creating structures, routines, and accountability mechanisms that maintain momentum regardless of temporary setbacks or motivational dips. These systems should include regular review cycles that track progress against objectives, identify emerging obstacles, and adjust tactics based on new information. The frequency of these reviews should match the pace of change in your environment. Rapidly changing situations require frequent course corrections, while stable environments can accommodate longer review cycles. Resource allocation is one of the most critical aspects of strategic execution. Every strategy requires finite resources, including time, money, attention, and human effort. These resources must be allocated across competing priorities in ways that maximize overall progress towards strategic objectives. Poor resource allocation can cause well-conceived strategies to fail, even when individual components are executed competently. Effective resource allocation requires understanding both the absolute and relative importance of different activities. Some activities are critical path items that must be completed before other activities can begin. Some activities have high leverage, where small investments create disproportionate results. Some activities are foundational and enable multiple subsequent activities. Some activities are optional and can be eliminated if resources become constrained. Strategic execution also requires building capabilities and developing people rather than just completing immediate tasks. Every execution activity provides opportunities for learning, skill development, and capability building that can be leveraged for future strategies. Short-term thinking focuses only on immediate deliverables, while strategic execution thinking considers how current activities contribute to long-term capability development. This capability-building mindset affects how you approach every aspect of execution, from hiring decisions to process design to performance measurement. You choose approaches that not only accomplish immediate objectives, but also strengthen your ability to execute similar strategies more effectively in the future. You invest in developing people's skills, even when that development takes longer than using existing capabilities. Communication and coordination become increasingly critical as strategies involve more people and more complex activities. Simple strategies executed by small teams can rely on informal communication and natural coordination. Complex strategies executed by large teams require structured communication systems and explicit coordination mechanisms to ensure everyone understands their role and how their work connects to the broader strategy. Effective strategic communication involves translating high-level strategic concepts into language and frameworks that resonate with people at different levels of the organization. Frontline employees need to understand how their daily activities contribute to strategic objectives. Middle managers need to understand how to coordinate their team's efforts with other teams. Senior leaders need to understand how to make resource allocation decisions that support strategic priorities. Risk management and contingency planning are essential components of strategic execution because no strategy unfolds exactly as planned. External conditions change. Internal capabilities prove different than expected. Key people leave. Competitive responses create new challenges. And countless other factors can disrupt even the best-laid plans. Strategic execution requires building flexibility and responsiveness into implementation plans. This flexibility should be built into the strategy itself, rather than just being reactive responses to problems. Multiple pathways should be identified for achieving key objectives, so that blocked routes don't derail the entire strategy. Critical assumptions should be monitored continuously, so that changes can be detected early. Contingency plans should be developed for likely scenarios so that responses can be implemented quickly when needed. Performance measurement and feedback systems are crucial for strategic execution because they provide the information needed to make course corrections and improvements. But measuring strategic execution requires different metrics than measuring operational performance. Operational metrics focus on efficiency, quality, and consistency of ongoing activities. Strategic metrics focus on progress toward objectives, learning, and capability development, and positioning for future opportunities. Strategic metrics should include both leading indicators that predict future results and lagging indicators that measure actual results. Leading indicators might include activities completed, relationships established, capabilities developed, or market position changes. Lagging indicators might include financial results, customer satisfaction, competitive position, or strategic objective achievement. The most sophisticated level of strategic execution involves creating self-reinforcing systems where successful execution strengthens your capability to execute future strategies even more effectively. This requires thinking beyond individual strategic initiatives to consider how current execution activities contribute to building organizational or personal capabilities that compound over time. Finally, strategic execution mastery requires understanding that execution itself is a strategic capability that can be developed and improved over time. Organizations and individuals who consistently execute strategies effectively develop reputations and capabilities that create additional strategic options. Poor execution, regardless of strategic brilliance, limits future opportunities and creates negative feedback loops that make subsequent strategies even harder to execute. Chapter 15. Becoming a master strategic thinker. After absorbing all these frameworks, principles, and techniques, You might wonder what distinguishes a true master of strategic thinking from someone who simply knows strategic concepts. The difference lies not in knowing more strategies, but in developing the judgment to know when and how to apply them. The wisdom to see patterns that others miss, and the character to use strategic thinking in service of worthy objectives rather than merely personal advantage. Strategic mastery begins with integrating all the different components of strategic thinking into a coherent personal system that operates naturally and automatically. Beginning strategic thinkers apply frameworks consciously and deliberately, which is appropriate for learning but too slow and cumbersome for complex real-world situations. Master strategic thinkers have internalized these frameworks so deeply that they operate unconsciously, freeing their conscious attention to focus on unique aspects of each situation. This integration requires extensive practice applying strategic thinking frameworks to diverse situations until the frameworks become second nature. You must move beyond simply understanding concepts intellectually to developing intuitive feel for how they work in practice. This comes from using strategic thinking consistently over extended periods, learning from both successes and failures, and gradually building sophisticated mental models of how strategic principles interact with each other. Strategic mastery also requires developing meta-strategic thinking, which is the ability to think strategically about your own strategic thinking. This involves recognizing the limitations of your own frameworks, understanding when your strategic approaches might be inappropriate for particular situations, and continuously evolving your strategic capabilities based on changing circumstances and new insights. Meta-strategic thinking includes understanding your own cognitive biases and emotional patterns that might interfere with clear strategic thinking. Everyone has blind spots, preferred approaches that may not be optimal in all situations, and psychological tendencies that can lead to poor strategic decisions. Master strategic thinkers develop sophisticated self-awareness about their own mental patterns and create systems to compensate for their limitations. True strategic mastery involves understanding that strategy without character is ultimately self-defeating. The most powerful strategic techniques can be used for destructive purposes that harm others and ultimately undermine the strategic thinker's own long-term interests. Master strategic thinkers understand that sustainable success requires building rather than destroying, creating value rather than just capturing it, and contributing to the common good rather than just pursuing narrow self-interest. This ethical dimension of strategic thinking isn't just about moral concerns, though those are important. It's also about practical effectiveness. Strategies that depend on deceiving, manipulating, or exploiting others create enemies, damage reputation, and eventually provoke counter-strategies that can be more powerful than your original approach. Strategies built on creating genuine value and developing mutually beneficial relationships tend to be more robust and sustainable over time. Master strategic thinkers also understand that the highest level of strategic thinking involves transcending strategy itself. While frameworks and techniques are essential tools for navigating complex situations, over-reliance on strategic calculation can interfere with authentic relationships, spontaneous creativity, and genuine human connection. The most effective strategic thinkers know when to be strategic and when to simply be present, honest, and responsive to immediate circumstances. This wisdom involves understanding that life is not entirely strategic. Some of the most important experiences and relationships emerge from non-strategic openness to possibility rather than calculated planning. Some of the most valuable insights arise from intuitive leaps rather than analytical reasoning. Some of the most meaningful achievements result from following passion and purpose rather than optimizing for strategic advantage. Strategic mastery requires balancing multiple time horizons simultaneously without becoming paralyzed by complexity. Master strategic thinkers can think tactically about immediate situations, strategically about medium-term positioning, and visionarily about long-term impact, all while maintaining clarity about which level of thinking is most relevant for current decisions. They avoid the trap of using long-term thinking to avoid short-term action, or using short-term urgency to justify abandoning long-term positioning. This temporal flexibility extends to understanding that different situations require different strategic approaches. Crisis situations require rapid decision-making based on limited information. Stable situations allow for more deliberate analysis and planning. Emerging situations require experimental approaches that can adapt as more information becomes available. Master strategic thinkers adjust their approach based on situational requirements, rather than rigidly applying the same strategic style to every situation. Cultural competence is increasingly important for strategic mastery in our interconnected world. Different cultures have different assumptions about time, relationships, authority, communication, and decision-making that affect how strategic thinking is applied and received. Approaches that work effectively in one cultural context might be completely inappropriate in another cultural context. Master strategic thinkers develop the ability to understand and work within diverse cultural frameworks, rather than assuming that their own cultural approach is universally optimal. This cultural flexibility allows them to build relationships and execute strategies across cultural boundaries that would be impossible for more culturally limited thinkers. Strategic mastery also involves understanding that the ultimate purpose of strategic thinking is not to control outcomes, which is impossible, but to position yourself to respond effectively to whatever outcomes emerge. The future is fundamentally uncertain, and attempts to control it completely usually backfire. But you can position yourself to benefit from positive developments and weather negative developments, regardless of which specific scenario unfolds. This requires developing what resilience researchers call anti-fragility, which is the ability to become stronger rather than weaker when exposed to stress, uncertainty, and change. While fragile systems break under pressure and robust systems survive pressure, anti-fragile systems actually improve under pressure. Master strategic thinkers build anti-fragility into their personal and professional systems. Finally, strategic mastery involves recognizing that your strategic thinking capabilities are not just personal assets, but responsibilities. As you develop more sophisticated abilities to influence outcomes and navigate complex situations, you gain more power to affect others' lives and contribute to broader outcomes. With this power comes responsibility to use it wisely and in service of objectives larger than immediate self-interest. The journey towards strategic mastery is never complete because the world continues evolving in ways that require new strategic approaches. Technologies emerge that change the rules of competition. Social movements arise that shift cultural norms and expectations. Economic conditions fluctuate in ways that affect what strategies are viable. Environmental changes create new constraints and opportunities that require strategic adaptation. Master strategic thinkers embrace this continuing evolution as an opportunity for ongoing learning and development, rather than viewing it as a threat to established approaches. They understand that mastery involves becoming comfortable with uncertainty and complexity, rather than seeking simple answers and predictable outcomes. The ultimate test of strategic mastery is not whether you can execute brilliant strategies in favorable conditions, but whether you can maintain strategic thinking and create positive outcomes even in chaotic, uncertain, and challenging circumstances. When you can remain clear-headed, creative, and effective, regardless of external conditions, you have achieved true strategic mastery. This mastery creates a profound shift in how you experience life itself. Instead of feeling like a victim of circumstances beyond your control, you recognize your agency in shaping outcomes. Instead of reacting to events as they unfold, you anticipate developments and position yourself advantageously. Instead of struggling against forces you don't understand, you learn to work with complex systems and leverage them toward your objectives. Master strategic thinkers understand that they are not separate from the systems they seek to influence. They are part of those systems, and their own actions and decisions contribute to the very conditions they are trying to navigate. This systems awareness creates humility about the limits of control, while also revealing the profound influence that strategic thinking can have when applied with wisdom, patience, and consistent effort over time. Your journey towards strategic mastery begins with the decision to think strategically about your own development. Every situation you encounter becomes an opportunity to practice strategic thinking. Every challenge becomes a chance to apply strategic frameworks. Every success becomes a case study for understanding what worked and why. Every failure becomes a learning opportunity for improving your strategic capabilities. The frameworks and principles you've learned in this audiobook provide the foundation. But mastery comes from applying them consistently in your own unique circumstances, adapting them to your own objectives and constraints, and gradually developing the wisdom to know when and how to use them most effectively. Your strategic mastery will be uniquely yours, shaped by your experiences, values, and the specific challenges and opportunities you choose to pursue. The world needs more master strategic thinkers who use their capabilities in service of positive change, value creation, and human flourishing. As you develop these capabilities, you join a community of individuals who understand that thinking strategically is not just about personal success, but about contributing to solutions for the complex challenges facing our interconnected world. Your strategic thinking journey has only just begun, but you now have the tools and frameworks to navigate whatever challenges and opportunities lie ahead. The question is not whether you can become a master strategic thinker, but whether you will commit to the ongoing practice and development that mastery requires. The choice, as always, is yours to make strategically.